everybody, welcome to CRTV episode number 54. My name is Holger Mueller with Constellation Research, here with my fabulous co-host.
Liz Miller here. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on. How are you?
I'm very good. It's March and I keep the travel under control. How about you?
Oh God, no, I'm completely opposite. Apparently in our dynamic duo here, when you keep travel in control, my travel spins out of control. So can we meet somewhere in the middle? But it's been nuts.
As a colleague, I would like to meet somewhere in the middle, but I kind of like it that my number of private trips is edging ahead of my number of business trips in Q1. So
that's the good stuff. Congratulations to you. I've been the opposite. I've been traveling the worst. I've apparently booked with the least efficient travel agent. So I do things like come home to California from India by way of New York. So it's silly things like that. We're having a good time.
It's kind of on the way.
It's kind of like if you spin the globe and then put your finger down, it's on the way. So it's totally good.
It just adds eight hours or so to your trip, but hey, what's 8 hours?
It's fine.
You can write a research report during that time. So
don't start. Oh my goodness gracious. Let's talk about the news, Holger. Lots of stuff going on. Let's go back in a little bit of Wayback Machine. So speaking of places that I was just recently at the Qualtrics X4 conference. It's the big party on the mountain in Salt Lake City. And as soon as I get back, as soon as I touch back on the ground, what happens? Qualtrics goes private. So SAP certainly now getting a little bit of that return back from their big acquisition, but Qualtrics has now gone private. We're going to see what happens there because I think it's one of those things could be a really good thing for Qualtrics because again, I think it can focus their leadership team back into their goals around what they want to be doing and how they want to be perceived. Certainly their capacity to harness customer feedback and customer voice right from that front line, to be able to automate those, to be able to kick off automations through the rest of the engagement cycle. Certainly something that is very important today as everyone has digitized those amazing customer experiences. I think the real winner in this might be SAP because they come out of this not only with their investment back, but they of course have been going in for partner deals. They've been able to expand some of their footprint and be able to do some business while they have been the stewards of Qualtrics. But talk about being able to get back some focus. I think this brings some focus back into where SAP wants to go. What do you think, Holger?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on record and happy to be wrong in this case. Right? I said SAP is never going to make that money back, right? Out of this romance of then CEO Bill McDermott admiring everything of Qualtrics, sending the management team there to learn entrepreneurial stuff. And my personal problem is always I can't Google their architecture. There's not even outdated whatever parts how this whole works. And I've been giving them a hard time since I've been talking to them. So I think to be fair to them, right? If you're in experience management so long, by the way, you forgot employee experience, much more closer to my heart than this customer side, right?
You bet.
The big employee experience.
Those darn customers.
But if you started this 10 plus years ago like they did, and if you rethink what you can do today, you would build this completely different. So they're a perfect showcase for being taken private, fixing their next generation product, taking advantage of cloud, taking advantage of AI. We'll talk about that in a second. So it could be a perfect showcase of being taken private and coming out gloriously. So I wish them well. Good luck. Congrats to SAP to have made money out of this adventure. And they still will be partnering, right? So this is the end of experience at SAP, right? The HR product will probably still be called HXM, but we will see how that goes. And I'm curious when and how and which offering they will emerge from being taken private.
Yeah, absolutely. Other big headlines, over the last couple of weeks and certainly enduring through this week because things are still reverberating through the market. Silicon Valley Bank, Holger, that was some big news. You certainly have the panic over the weekend, the bailout by the end of the weekend, but we're also seeing that same pattern and that similar pattern reverberate through a lot of other banks that, quite frankly, it's not just going to hit startups now. You're starting to hear not only other banks in the US, but Credit Suisse also had some rocky go, and now UBS has agreed to purchase their troubled portfolio. So when it comes to what you're hearing across technology portfolios, whether it is the VCs who are now sitting there going, okay, are we telling everybody to, now we're going to run on every bank that anyone has any money with, or, when you start to hear about those startups getting worried, what are you hearing out there?
Well, what I hear is and see is, I mean, you have to have safe best practices, right? So it starts with customers who are putting money into a bank. You don't want to put all eggs in the basket, even if it's the nicest egg holder which you can find out there, right? Which Silicon Valley Bank tried to be for a long time from the startup part, but that's not a safe financial strategy. And likewise, I mean, look at the bank that they're doing something right? Not having a chief risk officer for most of 2022 definitely is kind of like a warning flag that you're looking into, and you see the nervousness is there, right? Credit Suisse is very different. It's a run on deposits by mostly high valued individuals who know where they can take their money, doing the same mistake as the startups, right? So I'm looking to move my stuff under FDIC limits now between large banks. So I think that's a lesson learned from that perspective. But otherwise, when business is doing well, right? So there's nothing really to complain about. It's just another headache, another movement which is happening.
I think it's really interesting because, especially in regard to the risk, to not having that chief risk officer, I think that a lot of what happened at Silicon Valley Bank and a lot of what's happening in banking in general is kind of getting caught up in a whole lot of potentially politicized conversations. And I think that focus on what actually went wrong and what actually moved the needle either in a positive or negative way. If you aren't actually looking at your risk, if you aren't actually looking at solid business practices for your organization, I mean, that's a big red flag right there, but it's kind of hard to see that red flag, right? It's kind of hard to see it.
Right, but solid best practices or effects like rising interest rates will always make up for, we like and love each other so much because we are liking a certain political agenda, certain values and so on, right? It's good, right? Empathy is huge. But it's not going to win about interest rate changes, right? It's not going to win.
Right, exactly.
Have you hedged your deposits, investments, which I need for my deposits potentially in a real way? So you have to have those hard conversations as well, right? So and similar like on enterprise architecture, right? Same thing there. So
well, I mean, I think it's going to be the common theme of our news segment this time around. Holger is going to be, having realistic conversations. Talk about headlines leading everybody down a path. We cannot ignore OpenAI, great organization coming out with a lot of really interesting applications where AI didn't necessarily mean much to a lot of people. But, certainly in these last weeks, GPT-4, the generative model that is behind the headline-grabbing ChatGPT, has been released. And I think the big news there is quite frankly, the predictive power behind all of the parameters that are now speculated to be within the model. It's now trained, I believe it's on about 1 trillion parameters. So we're talking about a whole lot of capacity to be able to move that large language model forward. But like you and I have had this conversation before, Holger, behind the headlines has to sit a really hard conversation about what you are deploying AI in service of, right? So it's great to be able to run out and go and get yourself a ChatGPT integration, but where is that going and what is that bigger data model that you're beginning to fine tune that with? Because I think what people are kind of forgetting is that AI doesn't just pop out of the box a fully grown human that's going to be in, a sentient mind that's now going to be your greatest employee. There needs to be that training model behind there.
Right. So the big news last week basically was that all the vendors who play something in that field, being Microsoft and Google, came out with how it's going to enhance their products, right? And how their generative AI is going to change their products. It was good to see lots of things on the productivity side, like Office and G Suite, but also things in the applications which are slowly rolling out. The other big thing was that Microsoft finally lifted the bonnet on what's under ChatGPT. And it turns out, surprise, surprise, not really a lot of NVIDIA CPUs. James Guthrie, the head of product president, whatever, the guy who always wears a red shirt, which I love, consistency in clothing is important. He said we invested a triple-digit million effort in the hardware for this. So they're better going to make it work after putting like a couple of billion early investments and 10 billion now on consumption side on OpenAI. Interesting also what Google is going to do, plans to do, is doing, especially when it comes to differentiated privacy, like providing the models to the customer data, which is of course a big discussion in this whole content. So the gauntlet is down. We're waiting for AWS next week to say what they're going to do with generative AI. It's going to be interesting being the lead on cloud because AI has to live in the cloud, right? So it doesn't work.
I'm fascinated with this conversations around generative AI. Adobe's announcement certainly this week. They are not only announcing something called Adobe Firefly, which is going to be an openly available generative AI solution for image creation as well as text effects. But really, Adobe Summit is this week. We're going to be hearing a lot about AI, but we're going to be hearing a lot about generative AI. But quite frankly, we're going to be hearing a lot about ethics and kind of what starts to wrap around in that metadata around once you've created that content, what responsibility do we have to not only start to credit, especially when it comes to images and that kind of the diffusion models that are coming out and creating some really interesting graphics and some really interesting content there. Who do we credit? If something that you've just created is based on a single artist's distinctive style, how do we bring that and how do we bring all of that information together? Certainly Adobe has been at the center of creating those guide rails and creating those models where that type of data, that type of metadata, that type of tagging certainly moves forward. Because I think what we're already starting to hear are some grumbles from folks that it's great to be able to have this tool to steal Microsoft's aptly Dynamics 365 generative AI inclusion of Copilot, but it's great to have a Copilot that's generating all this content with you. But where are our customers? Where are those end receivers of that content going to start wondering about where those fuzzy lines are? Are they going to be able to see that every single email that you've written through something like ChatGPT all sounds the same? Or are they going to start to realize that every single image looks exactly the same?
The action's going to be my AI is going to answer to your AI, right?
Right.
I think the bots will talk to each other, right? The
bots will talk to each other, but I also think that there's a very real scenario where people are going to start using AI right-sized in that Copilot, in that really great assistive tool where it's creating some of the hardest pieces. I think one of the interesting things, like let's take Adobe's solutions as an example. Adobe's very clear. This isn't replacing the artist. What generative AI is replacing is that really hard work to create the layers. And for anyone who's ever had to create a complex illustration that's based on like fonts, it's crazy. It's like creating an effect on a font is actually really, really hard work. And there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of edges that have to be smoothed out. And so what generative AI is doing is in that application is actually creating the layers so humans can put it together faster and their creativity actually hits the ground faster. So I think, same thing what we're talking about with Qualtrics, same thing we're talking about with Silicon Valley Bank. It's about having those conversations up front about what you want to do, what you intend to do, and how you're going to be able to make that get there. So the strategic conversations, certainly, it's the theme of the week, Holger, strategy. Who knew?
Right. But I totally agree. We're in this human augmentation phase where AI is going to make work-life better and taking away some of the menial tasks, which we shouldn't really be doing. For Adobe, I wish them well, but at least I'm not the creative person. I'm wowed by the DALL-E 2 and so on stuff, right? I can't do this myself. I'm thinking like, should they worry their creative people? Probably not, right? So they're going to focus for that message, and that's the risk for anybody, not just Adobe.
Yeah.
That of course you underestimate what AI will be doing, and you keep with your existing best practices. So we'll see that, right? Yeah. A great example of that I was last week at Workday's Technology Summit, which for the first time is called the AI and ML Summit, right? Because they acknowledge how much is going on there, which is good, right? Beautiful Cavallo Point, review of San Francisco, in the rain, in the storm, in the sunshine, all seasons coming together in March already. But good progress on the HCM side, certainly. We'll hear more about them and the things that I care very much about payroll in the next coming months. They're doing the hard stuff, like I wrote in my research report with workforce management, helps that they acquired Windley. So they're going to be a player in the ERP space as expected.
So we got a couple of new segments coming up. I'm going to be talking about what happened to me in India. So I'll be talking about truly Zoho and my experiences there. So stay tuned for that. Holger, what segment you've got coming up?
I'm talking with Jon Reed from Diginomica about our takeaways from Workday's AI and ML Summit. The segment's going to be too long, so it's going to be piecemealed out. Apologies for that too long. We didn't have time to make a short segment quoting Mark Twain in the sense of video age, right? So, but it's going to be entertainment. It's always entertainment, Jon.
Awesome. Well, that does it for the news, folks. Stay tuned for those segments, and we'll see you in a bit. Hey everyone, Liz Miller again. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to share with you little bit about an adventure that I got to go on just recently. I was invited by the team at Zoho to be part of an event where they took a group of us crazy analysts and unleashed us on their headquarters just outside of Chennai, as well as introducing us to where Sridhar Vembu calls home and his headquarters in the south of India for an event that was called Truly Zoho. And as someone who's covered Zoho for a couple of years now, it's always been really hard to describe Zoho, because when you start to describe them and you start to talk about the culture and you start to talk about some of the things that Zoho does and the schools and the universities and the kids it starts to sound confusing. In fact, a lot of times I tend to think of Zoho as this enigma, right? It's a company that was really originally founded in the US, but it's really an Indian company that is proud of those roots and really soaks in that culture. It is a massive product, tool, platform portfolio that gets super hyper-focused on the individual user that's oftentimes building a small business. It is this massive organization, but talking to people, it still feels like a family business. It's an enigma. It's really hard to pin down sometimes. So when I got the opportunity to actually see this enigma up close and personal in India, I could not say no. We spent about a week with time on campus, getting to see not only a new massive campus that is purpose-built for collaboration, being built from the ground up. But we also got to see the people. You got to meet product folks who we might never get to meet at an event or through a small Zoom meeting. We got to really talk to folks in hallways. We had unfettered access. I mean, we could literally stop and talk to absolutely anyone. And y'all know me by now. I did. But here are a couple things that kind of I walk away from the Truly Zoho experience knowing. Zoho is really about decisions. And I don't mean decisions of like, yes, we're going to release this product, or hey, let's update the calendar. Let's talk about AI. Not those decisions. I mean the big decisions. And they're about making those decisions in ways that a lot of organizations could never comprehend. Let me give you an example. Chief Evangelist, the ever-patient Raju, which is going to be his new name, because I think I asked him about every piece of flora and fauna across our journey through India. And he answered every single one of them. Made a statement to us to kick off the entire Truly Zoho event. And he said this. He said that Zoho made a decision to sacrifice growth. If you said that to any other organization or in front of any other group of analysts, I think you probably would have seen people falling off their chairs. But he said it. Zoho has decided we were going to sacrifice growth because we needed to make a commitment that we weren't going to lay people off. They put people over everything else. Now, we can all say, well, they can do that because they're a privately held company and they don't have to answer to shareholders. And the answer that Zoho would give you is, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly why we don't take money from the outside. That's exactly why we're a privately held company. Because we can make those decisions. We can make the decisions to put people before growth, people before really anything else. And it's because they're able to do that they're also able to kind of focus in on another big aha moment for me, which is this is a company all about experimentation. And I don't mean that kind of experimentation where you try something and then you get fired for it, or you try something and you get in trouble for it. I mean, this is a culture that encourages and rewards experimentation, even when those experiments fail. These are people who are able to sit back and say, gosh, our customers seem to really be missing something, or they kind of seem to always be talking to us about this thing that's happening. And it might not be even part of the solution or the product set or the part of the business that team talks to. But you know what? Someone on that team gets to say, you know what? Maybe we should do something else in a finance system. And they can go take a team and they can go experiment and they can try and they can go build a whole new tool. This is just not the norm for a lot of organizations, but it is the norm at Zoho. And you can see that from every student that's part of Zoho University. You can see that in every single employee, see that in every single person that works within the Zoho ecosystem. That experimentation is expected, but failure isn't always expected. Failure is okay. Success isn't always expected. But that also brings me to the probably, one of the other interesting things that I saw, and it was a sense of pride. And you don't see that all the time when you're walking through a company's headquarters. That sense of pride of just really being proud of oneself, being empowered so much that that individual knows that they can stand up and contribute. They can ask a question. They can ask really hard questions to their bosses, right? It is a culture where pride is being empowered. And you could see that from a small rural school that's being started, where you've got 4-year-olds who were so proud to count that you knew that that was going to change the trajectory of that child's life. To the people and the individuals enrolling in Zoho University, who are just so proud to showcase what they have learned and what they have developed. It is completely a sense of pride, but it's also reflected in all of the leaders. I mean, I had tweeted that Sridhar Bembu, their CEO, was just emitting like proud dad vibes. And it was totally true, because every single time one of the young students from Zoho University stood up to explain what they had created and why, the thought process behind it, the experimentation behind it, that was what brought Sridhar Bembu so much pride. Not when he was talking about how well the company was doing or what was happening quarter over quarter or being able to build a new headquarters. It was about talking about the next generation of thinkers, the next generation of doers, of workers, of people, of kids willing to go and build an electric tuk-tuk at school. That is what drives everyone in that leadership group. And it's plainly obvious. But I'm going to tell you one thing. There is one thing that stands out most in my entire truly Zoho experience, and that is the opportunity to have met one person. There's a lot of times on calls you'll hear about, she's often mentioned a couple different ways. Most of the time people should use her name because her name is Radha Bembu. But sometimes people get called Sridhar's sister. But you hear about her. I knew that she was behind a lot of the products, especially the core products of things like mail and calendar, and really that core function that sits at the heart of Zoho and has really been very well known, probably one of the most well-known solutions and products out in the market for Zoho. But I never met her. I'd never even actually seen her, to be honest with you. But there she sat in a panel talking about what Zoho means for her, and what the innovations and the products and the roadmap of technology looks like for her. And talk about someone who does not really want to be in the limelight. This is not someone who is seeking out that spotlight as an innovator, but there she sat, a real life innovator. And the thing that most impressed me about not just her, but her posture and position at Zoho is that a lot of time gets focused, and rightfully so, on the big dreams that come from Sridhar Bembu. And I myself I admit that I am certainly a Sridhar fan. But for every big dream that gets to take off from the earth, there always needs to be an anchor. And it was plainly obvious to me, sitting there, watching the dynamic, not just of all the product teams, but also a family at the core of a business. It is plainly obvious that Radha Bembu is that anchor that holds down the reality of Zoho. And I was truly fortunate to have met her and gotten to know her a little bit. So my week was India was, I think for a lot of us, it was eye-opening, it was magical, it was truly Zoho, it was all those things. But what I think I appreciate and enjoyed the most was really getting to just be part of the culture, to sit and just watch how happy people are to be there. Because if there is a fundamental truth that all of us in this wild and wacky world of customer experience knows, it's that customer experiences should be happy. And you don't get to deliver those happy moments if you don't have happy people. And the spirit of innovation, that drive for experimentation, and that pride that everyone feels, that is what's truly Zoho.
Hello, everybody. it's Holger Mueller here from Constellation Research, here with my long-term colleague, but friend, Jon Reed. Hey, Jon, how are you doing?
Hey, man, we made it. We overcame many technical challenges to get this content to the peeps.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought, like, two sitting, not moving data connection, complete connection disruptions by both AT&T, T-Mobile. Shame on that. I need to switch to Verizon, I guess. I didn't bring my hotspot, which is on Verizon, so my bad.
Hey, we made it happen.
We were in beautiful Cavallo Point, right? Once again, I think the third or fourth time during my analyst career with Workday's traditionally technology summit, right? But this time it was the AI and ML summit, right? So snazzy renaming there.
Yeah, so I think the naming is important because this is the first time they've ever done that, and so that reflects Workday's belief that two things. First, they wanted all of us to believe that they're the market leader in AI, ML driven enterprise applications, but they also see this as a profound shift, which I think is the really important part. Anil Bhusri said several times that he thinks it's the future of enterprise applications, and he sees it as just as significant as the original move to cloud applications, which is important because he himself went from PeopleSoft client ERP type stuff to the cloud based. So he's saying that this move is just as important, and I think it's fair to say that he's looking at competitors with that same lens, both conventional and maybe even startups. But he's very, very aware of this, and he wants Workday to be the emerging leader in this category. So we shall see.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely right on the impact on that. Totally agree on that. Not so sure if they're on the right setup yet, right? We saw that.
We're going to get to that. Yeah. We're going to get to that in this discussion, I think. Yes.
Yeah. What else, right? Beautiful location, right? Interesting to have a cooking class with Marcus the cook, only on the Twitter handle, don't know his full name, right? So apparently lots of industry analysts are into cooking.
Indeed, more than I expected, but I'm always like in a suitcase, so I don't really, my cooking skills aren't anything to really brag about. But so what I did for you, since you set this up, I came up with themes, debates, and my underrated news stories of the show. So,
right, go for it.
Do you want me to throw out a few themes and then you can riff on them and see what we have?
Thematically, go for it.
Cool. All right. So one theme was AI ML, and then of course Workday did have to speak to generative AI also, because how can you not? And so we can talk a little bit about that. Another really big theme, of course, was leadership, because now we have a co-CEO. And Anil and his co-CEO were both there, and so we can kind of decide for ourselves. I probably mess up his last name, Carl Eskenbach, but he was present and having dialogue, and so basically, I think for those who are kind of stressed out about like what that means for the future of Workday, I would say probably not to stress too much about that, because I think it's pretty clear that even if Anil were to someday not be a co-CEO, he's going to have his hands in stuff. This is really about him getting back to a product, which his passion. And so his co-CEO, Carl, will be judged obviously on the growth and sales of Workday, because whether he likes it or not, that's really going to be his full purview. So that's kind of how I see it anyway, for the leadership theme.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Like, Carl is a sales professional through and through, right? You see it when you interact with him. So I think it's going to be good to jumpstart sometimes maybe sluggish Workday sales perspectives there. And we've seen this before, right? At SAP and at Oracle, right? The founder kind of like hands over the reins to a dynamic CEO, is to bring in the numbers, and they can play around with product, right? What could go wrong?
Right. Play around with product, but also lurking in the background, obviously imposing more direction than people may necessarily realize or think. So.
Exactly.
But we shall see how it plays out here. And then I think the third really big theme that I would pick is Workday moving from sort of being perceived as an HR vendor. They are violently, if I could use that word, trying to reject being perceived as just an HR vendor. And they have obviously deep penetration in the Fortune 500. They talk about 50% plus, maybe close to heading towards 60, adopting Workday HR. So there's some obvious reasons why they want to to expand beyond that, but also, for some time now they have, and so they have some pretty mature use cases around financials. But I think what it really is about, more than just expanding beyond HR, is that they want to solve bigger problems, and those problems involve both the CHRO, the CFO, the CIO. They want to solve enterprise problems. They don't even really want to talk about ERP anymore. To be honest, they don't like that. They haven't come.
CIO, right? A lot of talk. The CIO was the most mentioned CXO thing, which is new for Workday, right? So interesting.
Yeah, so that's the other big theme, I think, is just expanding the conversation along with their product line, and of course, layering the sort of planning and analytics and data stuff. So really a platform play, if we could kind of look at it that way, I would say.
No, I agree with the three themes totally. Shall we hit them down?
Yeah, we can do it, and the debates kind of fit into the themes, right? So I can, there's some debates. There's a debate on bias and AI responsibility. There's some debates on connecting these various areas, and then there's a very interesting debate on edge AI or federated AI, which you kind of provoke. So I don't know where you want to go, but those were all really interesting debates.
Right. Let's go with that, right? So I think, it's good from the direction, like we said, overall, because that's the change. My belief is you can only do AI and ML really well when you hit what I call in my research infinite compute. Infinite compute is when you cannot count the compute resource anymore. You have this elasticity, which basically the cloud offers, right? And this is why actually my biggest takeaway from the summit was not so much the commitment to AI. Everybody wants to do that. I mean, we named the summit, but they had 100+ customers who are in the public cloud. Those are the customers who can really take advantage of that and do store any data they want, bring in third-party data as much as they like, as much as they want to pay for, and then build AI and ML on top of that with the models they want, the models they purchase, looking at the models for Workday, instead of this older approach that we're seeing from some of the vendors who started early in the space. I practiced when I was running products here at FICO, right? But this is 2007, so that is 16 years ago, right? That's a lifetime ago in technology terms. And that's why I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, you see, I think Anil needs to speak with Mark. He always talks about it often when he's on stage, that he has a good relationship with Mark Benioff at Salesforce. Because Salesforce, interesting, had the same approach of Einstein, not Einstein, on that, but they moved away from that, right? They moved away from that Dreamforce, saying it has to be in the public cloud, the data has to be real time there, close to real time, and then we build AI, ML, the next generation of applications on top of that.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because Workday has committed to a federated machine learning approach, and they've articulated some advantages to that approach, which include things like customer data privacy, being able to train models on the edge, and things like that. And to your point about the old. Yeah, perhaps it's old, but it's also federated machine learning is also being reframed as a new technology, and even some of the public cloud players like Google are getting in on those offerings. So I think what's interesting about this is I don't think Workday's going to back down from their approach. So we're going to find out which approach is right.
Yeah, no, I'm always sensitive when I know from looking under the covers they can't do the other approach, right? Because their customers are not in the cloud yet. Right? You have to have your customers in the cloud to tell them, I can have all kinds of data, I can unleash as much as compute as I want to this, I can run any model that I want, I can bring in any model I want. You have to be in the public cloud to do that, right? So it's kind of like, let's look at Apple, right? Let's move enterprise software behind, right? Differential privacy, big thing from Tim Cook. Well, he says that also because he has no cloud. He doesn't have to run into these issues, right? So he's beefing up the iPhones, right? You see the same thing there. So I can be wrong, happy to be wrong, but it could be very self-serving. We'll see. Because for Salesforce, they switched completely around.
Well, we're going to find out. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch because there's no sign they were going to back down based on your feedback. So
no.
We shall see. They are very firm on that point. I think a couple really interesting ones too for me. One where I thought I was really impressed, and one where I still have questions. The area where I have questions, let's start with that, is around this whole notion of sort of the impact of bias and the fact that AI systems running at scale have human impact. And you look at it in terms of there's a frivolous lawsuit going on, and I want to be clear, I think it's frivolous, against Workday about this topic right now, having to do with HR. hiring and screening. The point is that all vendors in this space are going to face these kinds of things. And so for that reason, I'm not surprised that Workday is being very clear that what customers do with their data is the customer's responsibility. And but it creates a bit of a challenge because you're handing customers very powerful tools. And so what I had pushed Workday on around this is, okay, I'm not going to get them to back off of something that has legal consequences. I totally get that. And I understand that position. But Workday is trying to position itself as an ethical AI vendor, and I think they're doing a good job of that around areas like transparency of their model, explainability. And my only point is that part of that should, the other top tier they should add is education, which is helping customers understand the power of these tools and also helping customers learn from each other so that the customers that are doing a good job of using these tools responsibly can share their lessons and elevate those stories so that other customers can learn from those examples. So I think to me, that's how Workday can kind of meet my position halfway, which is, okay, it's still the customer's responsibility, but what's wrong with making it a priority to educate customers on how to use these systems? So that's where I stand on that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on the education part. There's need of a lot of education in this, right? Because a lot of things can be done and need to be understood. I think we're far away from the enterprise software vendors giving the kids the scissors, and they don't want the kids to run around with scissors, right? The famous analogy.
Right.
I think we are far away from that. And I think when we'll get close enough from an evolution to that, there will be enough safeguards in there with AI, watching AI potentially, right? So, but in the meantime, it's really, I like the approach which Anil said, which Cheyenne said, look, we give you algorithms, it's your data, right? So,
right.
Which I think ultimately it always will boil down to. So I'm totally with them on that.
Yeah, well, and he was very clear with me when I asked that question. He was not mincing any words on that point.
It's a sign that you ask good questions when the CEO has to step in from the background.
Well, Holger, episode 54 in the bag. How do you feel?
I'm feeling good. I mean, another episode in the bag is always a good thing.
Another episode in the bag. And of course, with the end of this episode, it means we hand the baton to our friends, Doug Henshin and Diane Hinchcliffe. They will be up next with episode 55. I'm sure there's going to be more news, hopefully no more bank collapses or any crazy machines trying to take over the world. But for Holger and myself, you guys have been watching CRTV. You can always follow us on Twitter at Liz K. Miller, at Holger MU. You can also follow Constellation. And gosh, there you are. Good morning. I can't understand you. What are you talking about?
This is why I'm dissing you for being late in Italian. It's nicer.
It does sound nice.
It does sound really nice. Like, oh my gosh, good morning to you too. Oh my God, that's great to see you as well. And he's like, F you, late.
I would tell you wouldn't know. Let's go.
Hannah, can we please, in the bloopers, use just the line, a healthy dose of marketing I respect. That's it.
I totally respect a healthy dose of marketing.
And the marketing Twitter went wild. I feel like there's going to be a kale smoothie, like post roll. Like it's going to be like anchors, Holger Liz, producer, Hannah Hawk, and then it's going to be kale smoothie. I'm not bringing a blender to Vegas, so.
I'm traveling with a blender. Sorry.
Did you just say you travel with a blender?
Yes, since the 1st of October.
I cannot believe you brought a Vitamix to CC.
Did you see how many rollers he had at Solstice? Of course he brought his own blender. I'm so confused. What is the news?
Good to go?
I don't know. Hang on. I'm literally going to Google what's news has happened.
Great.
And all of this before Reagan wakes up.
Listen, I've got a tiny terrorist who's going to wake up in like 10 minutes.
Witness right now.
Got to go. We need to go.